ain't going back. Not gonna buy into all that. Hey, ain't gonna hide. Gonna let all the fears slide. Got mother nature, it's on my side. Got all of the loving growing inside.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the New Now. I am super delighted and honored to finally get to put a smile to the face of Iam Saums. We've been communicating directly and indirectly for many, many years. He's been gracious enough to contribute, dozens of articles when we were doing our NOW Agora newspaper print, and since then online. And Iam, welcome to our chat. How are you? And thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you for the introduction, and I'm doing great and excited about talking with you.
Yeah, well, just in case some of our viewers aren't aware, Iam has shared, as I mentioned, dozens of articles. Some of the titles I wrote down here so I can share with you from, an essential change, a center of attention, era of awareness, just to give you an idea of the kind of information that he has graciously shared with us. He's an author and a poet and a seer and a musician. And, we chatted a little bit about, let's get right into it on the current situation that most of humanity seems to be facing, in relation to them, shall we say, growing up into their own responsibility for becoming an adult on this planet and, creating a good life for themselves. So generally, maybe you can give us a bit of background as to why you started writing, what your motivations are, what you feel about the current situation. And then we can chat about perhaps some solutions as we both see are possible for people to live good lives through the current challenges.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I was most inspired when I was in high school, and I kind of ran with some friends that were diverse. They were open-minded. They were wanting to make a difference. Obviously, at some point in time, life kind of took it away from them. But for those of us who are still standing, so to speak, I felt like there was this invisible presence in life in general, and my life as well, that tended to impact my progression in such a way that I wasn't able to reach like a space of happiness or a space of relatedness or connectedness or awareness. And so eventually at some point in time, through many, many years of like study and research and meditation, I'm also a musical artist. So I went through a stage in my life where I kind of got lost in the oblivion of the rock and roll life, so to speak. And so that was kind of a diversion that in some ways was good creatively, but in other ways it kind of hindered my ability of being able to see how I see things now in the world, And so I think that started me back in high school. It started me on a path that helped me to be able to become more sensitized to awareness, and to things outside of the box, so to speak, of what social reality is all about. And when I say social reality, I mean the reality that we all are kind of pigeonholed into, to live and exist in and enable a system that ultimately is not very beneficial to the very inhabitants that exist in it.
Well, how did you get, from there to here, so to speak? Were there any transformative moments, that stand out? I mean, I've gone through a whole bunch in my life where I've seen where, I was raised to be a lawyer. My sisters are lawyers. Three of them were, well, two of them and one's a chartered accountant. They tried to put the suit on me and it never fit, kind of choked me when I, went to a university, political science I took it for a couple of weeks before I ran away screaming, quite literally, back when I tried to do that. And, I saw, as you said, politicians were lying. My parents never happy, even though they professed a certain sort of lifestyle. What brought you, let's say, towards the kind of information that you've been sharing, which has always resonated, since I read your first article, with what I felt was a proper, shall we say, direction or path for people to put some actions into play so that they can make a better life for themselves.
Yeah, there's been many different transformational experiences for myself that led me to a space of seeing the world as it is, as opposed to the as it seems, or the way that I want it to be, or the way that somebody else wants it to be.
Mm.
And the first one was going back to when I was in the musical group, when I was in my early 20s, living like an oblivious life of partying and, you know, having a good time and so on and so forth. And at some point in time, I woke. Yeah, everybody probably has been there before, but at some point in time, I woke up and I didn't feel well. I mean, I was hungover. I was tired from the night before, and so on and so forth. And something inside of me moved, and it said, no, it's time to stop that lifestyle. It's time. There's something more, you know. And about a few months after that, I started to meet with a group of friends of mine, and they were all studying the fourth way school in the Gurdjieff tradition that goes back, you know, 100 years or more. And the fourth way school, as I understand it, which, you know, I think it's an individualized interpretive experience to some degree for all people, which I think is what he was intending when it was created or established, was understanding that human beings are multidimensional, that multidimensionality connected them with something that sources them energetically and otherwise, which is ultimately the source of creativity and imagination, consciousness, awareness, the acceleration of evolution and growth and development, and ultimately transformation, speaking of that. And so that kind of led me on a path from there, from that first transformation, personal transformation, that led into awareness and understanding, and finally being able to start to see the invisible elephant in the room, so to speak, that we all were dealing with when we were younger. We wanted to make a difference. We wanted to be activists. We wanted to make, you know, we wanted to make change in the world. We wanted to transform the world and make it be something that was more beneficial for all as opposed to for a few. But after that, it was just a series of events that led to, you know, further studies in my Celtic heritage, in my history, ceremonially and ritualistically. And then ultimately that led to a brief study in the Kabbalah, you know, not necessarily in Orthodox Judaism, but more in a sense of the more contemporary perspective of it, as the Kabbalah Center is doing probably to this day. And then ultimately that led me into Lakota practice, you know, sweat lodges. I hate to use that word because it's not the proper word when it comes to that, but for the understanding element of it for people that may be watching this, those types of ceremonies, sweat lodges, or, you know, other things of that nature. I won't get too deep into that because that'll take 4 hours.
Well, what was the proper way to title a sweat lodge? Like,
Some tribal affiliations call it a nipi ceremony, which is a renewal of breath. Others call it a tonkan tipi, which is in reference to the stones that are used in the ceremony.
interesting. Renewal of breath. I mean, for me, seeing, you know, the crazy masquerade, so to speak, that's been going on these days, you know, I find that a good direct correlation to the attack on spirituality, for lack of a better way to put it, because obviously the breath is
Oh
important.
yeah.
And you know, deep breathing, being attached to spirit, inspiration, quite literally, you know, means to, you know, bring,
Mm-hmm.
you know, spirit into your body. And you know, and the requirement of the practices, as you said, it's interesting because I've been to a few sweat lodges myself, and I've never heard it called renewal of breath, which I find is much more appropriate. You know, how would you perhaps connect your Celtic heritage, let's say, to the Lakota practices, to what you've decided to share, to what's going on today in relation to?
I think the connection between, I mean, they're two very different cultural traditions in and of themselves. And because my bloodline goes back to Ireland, County Clare, County Sligo, and some of my family members that still live there, I'm not really much in communication with them. But I think it's just the earth-based living on the land in a natural way, is maybe the best correlation. I know probably I've been exposed more to Lakota tradition than I have Celtic recently. Even though I had extensive exposure, a lot of it I've forgotten, or I've moved into other things or whatever. So I think it's the earth-based tradition, the cultural tradition of it for the most part, and the ritual aspect of it. I mean, the rituals are very different, so to speak. I think many people misinterpret Celtic ritual as paganism or things of that nature, and it's very distinct from a whitewashed kind of perspective on European traditions
Very different. I've studied
that are indicative of the Western perspective, that is.
Celtic traditions in the Fortunate Isles, and why Ireland was called that. I've heard a lot of alternative perspectives on having been saved from the previous flood and having been a bastion of intelligence and old style, as you say, living off the land and more in touch with and in tune with the spirit and the spirituality of things, and probably why it's been attacked so much and denigrated to as you put it, more paganism, which it really wasn't at all, because it was more.
Yeah.
It was, and it's interesting that obviously you come from an Irish background. How did you get connected with the Lakota tradition, and maybe you could share a bit about that and how it's influenced you? And because obviously I can see a lot of that in the writings that you've shared, especially over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I was introduced almost 20 years ago by what they call a pipe ceremony, or a chanupa ceremony, that was going on at my sister's place when she used to live in Michigan. She lives in England now, and she's on the British side of the family, so there's like this interesting rivalry between my brother and myself and my sisters, because they're very Welsh background, English, so on and so forth. But I was invited to a chanupa ceremony at her house almost 20 years ago, and at the ceremony, the gentleman that was facilitating the ceremony, I started singing the songs. I'd never heard the songs before, like the Lakota traditional ceremonial songs, but for some reason it just really clicked with me and it resonated with me, and I started singing along. And so he came up to me after the ceremony and he said, "What's your name?" And so I told him my name, and he's like, "Where did you learn those songs?" And I said, I've never heard them before. He said, "You need to come to Sweat." So then after that, that's what led me into this whole path of the last 20 years.
I mean, I find it fascinating that, I come from a Polish background, or my history. I don't know anybody in Poland anymore, but, my grandparents and parents come from that part of the world, before they moved to Canada. And it seems, your history is, as you said, Irish, Welsh, British, sort of thing. So it's very interesting that, people like us, if I dare put myself in the same boat, so to speak, end up in North America, coming from a background that is divergent in many, many ways from native traditions, native cultures, sweat lodges, spirituality in its way. And yet, here we are, to people of pale skin, let's say, kind of moving in a direction and having, how do I want to put it, inspired this kind of a movement that is towards spirituality, that it's towards evolution, that's toward, integrity and movement, and back to the land, and literally the kind of movements it seems to me we both want to do in helping people to help themselves, through effective movements of, I would say, intelligent explorations in what's possible, as a person on the planet, as a man, as a being that can lead maybe a community back to itself, and its heart.
Yeah, I feel very grateful to have been given the opportunity to be able to participate in the ceremonies that I have been over the last 20 years with the people that I have had the extreme pleasure of being able to share in those ceremonies, because one of the things that I've learned in my participation and experience is that it's a blessing in many ways, because for many years a lot of those ceremonies were outlawed, by the United States government. And so the opportunity of being able to participate and relate with people on a level that is a bit more grounded and more earth-based And that's also very humble. There's a humility that goes along with that type of experience that I can't even begin to describe in words, that puts you in a space of understanding and observation and experience of life that I don't think anything else in my life experience I've ever had. And so for me, with those experiences are also key to what has led me, getting back to the writing, led me to write what I've been writing, you know. And one of the reasons why I started writing is because I would come up with these ideas and I'd write them down and I would send them to friends and they would really like them. One of those friends, as you know, is Alva Thompson, who's an author and somebody that has really inspired and empowered me to see the world as it is and not as it seems or as I want it to be. And I think there was an acceleration in communication with her over the last 20 years of knowing her, where I really started to see things the way that they were, you know, and I was able to put a face on the faceless, you know, because a lot of the people that are enacting events that are going on to this day in this world, they are very elusive characters. You know, they're very in the background. They present themselves to be something they're not, as you had alluded before with politicians and how they express themselves or represent themselves in the political arena. And so that's what kind of led me to being able to try and find a way to express myself creatively and imaginatively within the expression of consciousness and awareness and understanding. And not only that, I mean, because it's one thing to know about these things, it's another thing to be able to translate them and apply them to daily life so that it's actually making a difference for people and obviously for yourself. And that's what inspires me the most to write, is the, you know, attempting to take content that is beyond words and to be able to have these ideas, these insights, these epiphanies that I believe are sourced from the universe, and find the words to be able to succinctly and as clearly as possible express them, so that not so that I sound like I know what I'm talking about, because I don't really care about that. I mean, if I don't sound that way, that's great. I don't, you know, the message is more important to me, and the expression of, you know, what's going on in the universe is way more important than what I think about it or who even I am. You know, I'm insignificant in regards to the overall grand picture of what's really going on in the universe right now.
Yeah, I mean, I find way too many people, you know, see the challenges. You know, we get a lot of letters, obviously, and phone calls, and, you know, they start finger pointing. You know, if they change the rules, if the government lets us, if we, you know, if we protest this, if we sign petitions for that, you know, somehow it's going to change our lives. And, you know, I find that it's really a distraction from probably the stresses most people are really feeling is, you know, change yourself, you know, and you know, act differently and bring about, as you said, the inspirations from spirit or energetic realities, you know, however you see that. And, you know, if you share that out with your community or the people immediately in touch, you know, with you, as you said, you've met Elva and I've chatted with her, and then you and I have been connecting, and, you know, recently, you know, those connections have been reaching out towards other people. And so many people are asking us what they can do in relation to the current craziness, you know. And you know, it's not about a digital coin, right? And it's not about, you know, letting your store open for a couple more hours, or taking the masks off your children, although those are all, you know, potential, you know, small solutions, let's say. You know, what would you say to people that bring those kind of, let's say, surface solutions to you? You know, how is that affecting maybe your neighborhood? I know you're in the eastern United States right now. You know, how would you say your spiritual practices are helping you through these challenges, and maybe the people closest to you and some further away?
Oh, it's vital. I mean, specifically for the last year and a half since the pandemic thing all started, and since social imposition, of things that have been occurring, laws that have been passed, or boundaries that have been broken, from a standpoint of governments or corporations or financial institutions, or any of those people that are, pulling the strings, so to speak, if you want to say. It's been vital for me over the last year or so to have the practices that I do on a daily basis in order to stay grounded, stay centered, stay focused, stay clear, stay connected. More so than anything, and I, for some reason, I started really becoming very intentional and committed to practicing all these things. Whether it was the prayer in the Lakota tradition, or whether it was the meditation that I do, twice a day, that I've been doing for 6 years. And I was like, why am I doing all this? Why am I doing all this? And all of a sudden, like last March 2020 happened. I'm like, oh, now I know, because it helped me to stay grounded, centered, focused, and present. Being present in this reality as it is in social reality is very difficult, because there are so many distractions, like you mentioned, Lorenzo, and there's so many events that are occurring, most of which we're probably not even aware of, because one, the things that are impacting or imposed upon the world that are changing it the most are the things you never hear about, on the mainstream media news channels, and those are the things that are also willfully discredited and debunked by people that choose to claim to see the truth as conspiracy theory. Troubling when you have a society that has begun to believe what they're being told, and going along with that, and towing the line to some degree on a social level, to sustain and enable that structure that's been put in place to repress the evolution, and ultimately the transcendence or ascension of the human race into higher forms of consciousness and awareness.
Definitely. I mean, how have you seen, maybe I'll share some experiences. How have you seen your actions? Because this is something I think is of dire importance to people that are looking outside themselves, and the challenges, and feeling manacled, let's say, because of there's another lockdown happening, or there's another this happening, or more of these bad things are coming our way and less of these good things. And I've had my challenge is sharing that if you change your actions, you change your perspective, you change what you're doing, your reality changes for you,
Absolutely.
Irregardless of any outside influences. Do you have any specific experiences or any specific suggestions or stories you feel could help illustrate that? I don't mean to put you, on a hot spot here like that, but
no, that's what this is all about anyway. And I think that the biggest difference that can be made, like I was saying earlier, is, it's nice to know all this stuff, and to be able to have conversations about it, but how do we as human beings find a way to apply the insights, the epiphanies, the inspirations, the creativity? How do we apply that to daily life so that we can make the difference? And I think it goes back to what you were talking about earlier, where each person, the biggest difference each person can make is transforming themselves. That's the only thing any of us have any control over, if we choose to perceive it as control. Because in my perspective, I don't see it as control. I see it as actually showing up and being present to our lives and to our possibility and potential as human beings, and finding a way to make that connection, so that within our own transformation, it should be enough, for ourselves to start. We can't help other people transform or force them to transform, in as much as I would hope that on the other side of that, where social reality is trying to impose restrictions or lockdowns, like you say, or you have to take this vaccine, or you have to take that vaccine, or whatever. What's missing there is the choice. Where's the choice? And I think that a lot of people kind of overlook the importance of the power of choice on a personal level. And I think the most powerful choice anybody could ever make is the power to transform not only themselves, but their perception and their experience. Because I think the perception in society has become so manipulated and so narrowed by how social reality is projecting that perception or imposing restrictions upon the perception to have people believe that their perception is real, or the imposed perception is real. So I think like one of the first steps for a lot of us is to be able to step outside of the social reality game that's going on and just be an observer.
Yes.
Observe what's going on, you know, see what's going on, understand what's going on, because once we're able to see it for what it is and observe it and become an observer within ourselves, then we can start to separate ourselves from what they call a false personality, which is the persona that we throw out to the world if we go to our job, or if we go to the grocery store, or even talk to our friends or family members. We throw out a false personality, which is a terminology that was used in the fourth way school. And once we're able to shift into an observer role within ourselves and see the world and social reality for what it is, then we start to become present to something else, which is the true personality, which is a little bit more closer to who we are in heart and soul, in relation to the universe. And so once you get into the true personality, then you can start making a connection with that soul level, or with that intuition, and ultimately with the universe. But it really requires us to be able to step away from a lot of those distractions, like you'd mentioned before, and see perception as something that is more mutable than people. I mean, a lot of people are like really fixed on their perception, and because they believe in their perception, the power of their choice to believe makes it so. It creates that reality. But people don't realize that you can create whatever reality you want for yourself. It's just a matter of the focus of the energy that we're all sourced through the universe to focus it in to a certain direction of intention so that we actually manifest it in our lives. And that's where the transformation comes into place. So I think that's like, in a nutshell, without getting too deep into the metaphysical aspects of it, or the multidimensionality, or what I like to talk about in my articles about universality, which is our ability of being able to be expressions of the universe in this reality and make the difference that we can make. Once we're able to make that basic shift as a person living in this world, as a spirit living in this world, then that really creates a momentum that begins to help us to transcend above the duality that is rampant everywhere.
How do people begin? Like, I understand what you're saying, and I'm looking back over my life, even as we're having this conversation, and when I stopped being maybe a lawyer, I was a stockbroker for a little while. I had that experience and went, oh, that's crazy. I'll be dead, when I'm 45 if I continue on that path. And, and from there, I've traveled through Medicine Rock in the United States. I've had my own metaphysical experiences, we'll say, drum journeys and dreaming, and and I've seen native energies floating around when I camped out in near Medicine Rock in Montana. I think it was southern Montana for a little while. How did you get? A lot of people ask me, lucky enough, let's say, and I know it's not luck, because I know we make our own luck, or I feel that anyways. But how did you get lucky enough? How would our viewers perhaps see that they can also be lucky enough to start to take these steps? I mean, I think it's the only way out from these shenanigans. I mean, the politicians are doing their job, in my opinion. They're not, people suing them and telling to get them to stop and saying, you shouldn't be doing this, it's bad, and the lockdowns are killing people and more people are dying, and the vaccines are going to do this, that, and the other bad thing. In my opinion, it's all done on purpose, right? There's no mistakes being made by the people that are running the show. I don't know where they're getting their marching orders from, but it's not a nice place, right? And it's not
Well,
someone.
it's probably not from the universe.
It's not from someone that loves you or your family or your community. And what I think is the kindergarten way of looking at things, again, in my opinion, is that the politicians know what's going on. They know what these vaccines are going to do. They know what a lockdown does. They know what, cutting, shutting down farms, and all the stories I hear here and there. The chemtrails, if you want to get into that, or the TV and its nefarious beginnings and intentions, and even where that comes from and why that's there. And you know, like you said, how people's awareness is being directed towards a cage of stupidity is how I'll put it, actually. But you know, how do they get a chance to understand from what you've seen and I've seen that your awareness is manipulated, and you can, you know, pick up the responsibility for that and say manipulate yourself if you like, which, you know, or transform yourself towards these options that a lot of people don't perceive as possible.
Yeah. I don't know if I consider myself lucky, because I think it's more focus, intention, and a lot of work, you know, on a personal level, to have those practices in place so that you're consistently as focused and connected and related and grounded and centered as possible. I mean, being focused and grounded and centered right now is like vital. And if you don't know what that is, find that out for yourself. You know, it may be completely different for me than it is for you, or than it is for anybody that might be watching this interview. So, but I think that it begins at least it began for me when I started to meditate, when I started to be quiet, you know, in myself, find myself in environments that were quiet. And I was fortunate enough to be introduced to or meet people that had a similar perspective and similar insightful experiences that we have, to inspire and support and sustain that experience of consciousness and awareness. And so for me, I think, you know, I have to believe on a universal level that the common tones, quote unquote, to use a musical term, is being present, is being focused, is being grounded and centered, is being quiet, you know, finding a way to shut the mind off enough to be able to be present to ourselves, to our environments, you know, to things beyond our understanding or imagination. I mean, one of the greatest things for me has been creativity, whether it's writing articles or writing music or even playing music, or writing poetry or whatever. I mean, the expression of creativity transforms instantly. I mean, it transforms you, it transforms your environment, it transforms your perception. But like, first and foremost, and this is something that, you know, I came across years ago, the biggest transformational shift I believe that any human being can have, because this is a vital practice for each and every human being, is breathing. And as soon as you become present and to conscious breath, you know, being conscious of the breath and slowing the breath, it transforms everything. It transforms your perception. It transforms your body. It quiets your mind. It calms your heart, and it connects you with something, you know, beyond social reality. It connects something beyond the known understandable elements of the human being. So that would be the one thing that I would say to anybody is to breathe. Like, anytime that you get triggered, anytime that something that happens in the environment that you're in, whether you're at your job and somebody upsets you, or whether you're walking down the street and somebody's talking about the other political party, if you're a political person, you just breathe. That's your reaction. And so I got into a habit of practicing that whenever I was in circumstances or environments that were compromising or challenging my personal focus and centeredness and groundedness, is realizing that the only way that I could reclaim the power that I was losing by giving that energy away to other people and reacting to them, you know, in their perspective, or even their expression of their perspective, was to stop and breathe immediately. And within that moment, the breath, which is a very strong foundation stone for meditation, obviously, is that breath is transformational in so many ways that we're probably not even aware of, all the different nuances that can occur when we do become conscious of our breath. But that's the best way that I have found personally to reclaim the power that I was losing. You know, going back to the time when I was in high school and I there was that elusive thing that was taking possibility away from me that I wasn't even aware of. Finding the breath, being in the breath, and that's what makes us present. That's what makes us focused, grounded, and centered. And I know I keep saying those words, but that's the way that the world is. That's the most important thing, is finding our focus, finding our balance, finding our centeredness, finding our groundedness, finding our breath in those moments when we're being taken away from our life.
I mean, I think obviously the I'll call them the monsters that be are aware of this. I mean, if you look at the shadow side of the positive, the fact that the breath is being encouraged away from everybody.
Oh yeah.
Mask yourself up, do 2 masks, do 3 masks. Stay inside, don't go to nature. To me, it shows what you've said is something that the crazy, I can call them demons if I like, or the fourth dimensional archons. I'm not sure, we're going to get into, what's trying to control things and take people's breaths away. But, it's showing that, what they say is not permissible is probably exactly where you need to go, to go in the opposite direction of what the mainstream is telling you to do. I've been lucky. I've been lucky in my way because, I always hated being told what to do, and I would always go in the opposite direction of what I was told. And that's pretty much how I got here eventually, is they say, go do this. So I'm going to go, don't do that. Let's try it. I mean, So deep breathing, I found the same results, that you mentioned. It does change your perspective and what you're doing. A bit about like finding the right way. How have you found, like obviously you've probably read some Castaneda books, I'm guessing, some Carlos Castaneda.
Sure.
I would assume you're familiar with the recapitulation, which is the cleansing breath and things like that. Going through your life and seeing where you've been, I'll call myself, where I've been an asshole to myself and others, or where I've been not so nice to the life around me, and having to go from there and pick up the pieces of myself that I've dropped in those instances where I wasn't loving. What do you like? Have you practiced any recapitulation yourself? Is there an easy or simple way maybe to share that with our viewers? I would think that's a great way for anybody to start that doesn't know where to go, is to to see maybe where they've lost their power or given it away. Or
I think the practice of breathing that I have is basically a natural form of breathing. I'd never practiced any breathing practices or any specific method or modality of breathing in any tradition. But the funniest story, but it's not very funny, I guess, if you look at it from a different perspective, but the way that I learned to breathe was actually on what they call a Hablachapi, which is a Lakota ceremony, which is, in other words, called a vision quest. And I was on a vision quest, and I won't get too deep into it because it's important not to share too much of your experience, when you have intense experiences like that. But for the sake of the topic that we're talking about, I learned to breathe on Vision Quest because I was having a difficult time. The weather was very hot. There was no shade. There was nothing to give relief. And I heard this voice that said, breathe. And so I just got really close and present to that breath. And I just breathed deeply in and deeply out. And I just kept doing that over and over and over again in a rhythm. And there's a rhythm to it that really helps to not only ease or comfort, but it also calms. Like when we get agitated or anxious in any given circumstance, our heart rate starts to race, our mind starts to play tricks on us. Our body tenses up, and our adrenal system and our nervous system starts to fatigue, and it ultimately may burn out if we're not present to it, which I think is what's happening to a lot of the people in the world right now with the pandemic. I think a lot of people are suffering from adrenal fatigue and burnout, and nervous system being compromised. And I think that that's what the medical industry should be addressing too, outside of trying to give people vaccinations or whatever else it is that they're doing, which, I mean, not all of it is bad by any means. I don't want to give the medical industry a bad name in that respect, but there's a lot of other side effects to what's going on right now, namely the adrenal burnout or the nervous system being compromised, that is really impacting people on a very deep level that I don't even think that most of the world is aware of right now. And what happens when you have a nervous system that's compromised and an adrenal system that starts to become burnout, your immune system starts to fail. And when the immune system starts to fail, then you become more susceptible to contracting things like the virus. So I truly believe, going back to the breath, that breath was the first medicine that we were given when we were born in the world, because we can't live without the breath. And people can live unconsciously by not, they breathe in as much as they need to, but they're not aware of their breath. And they're not aware of the power of their breath and how it does reclaim their power and how it does sustain them in many different ways. So for me, like, the breath is vital and pivotal moving forward. But I mean, there's something to the breath that helps to transform a lot of that adrenal fatigue and that nervous system being compromised, that allows us to shift more so into a natural form or state of being that helps us to be able to reconnect with our soul and the universe. I mean, the gateway, I've always believed that the gateway to the soul and the universe is through the heart. A lot of people kind of, in the 90s, when they were going through the metaphysical explosion and a lot of that stuff was starting to come out, and more people were kind of moving away from religion and into spirituality, so to speak. They always would speak about mind, body, spirit. And I'm like, well, where's the heart? The heart is like the center of it all. Like, if you don't have the heart, you're not going to access your spirit, or that's my belief. So I think that in knowing that the heart center is something that emits or radiates and resonates an energetic signature, our personal energetic signature connected with our soul and the universe for 6 feet and beyond. And we're impacting people and circumstances in our environments with that energy. And so the breath helps us to return to awareness of that energy sphere that we all have around us, so that we can make sure that the energy that we're expressing is to the best benefit of not just ourselves, but everybody that may come in contact with it.
Yeah, I've seen, or I've done some studies, there's 30 times the amount of energy coming out of your heart center than your head center. And, when you breathe deeply, you're not in your head anymore, right? You immediately do go to your body, and it takes away from, let's say, the cage of beliefs that is probably most people are carrying around in their head system, that just gets worse with more TV or more cell phone use or more mainstream media, garbage or regular newspapers. And, it seems to me perhaps that breath is quite literally a hole out of the cage of stress that perhaps way too many people are living through. And as you say, that's more than likely what's making everyone sick more than anything is
Yeah.
it's obvious that if you're stressed, you get sick. And if you're relaxed
Yep.
and loving, you feel better. I mean, that's almost kindergarten healing advice, I would say, from what I've seen over the last while. And it's very interesting that but by lucky, when we were talking before, I simply meant it's like, you've had your life as, we'll say, a regular person in the world. You come from a background where you could have been caged like everyone else, is how I meant it. And same to me, like, I've got 3 sisters, and they're oblivious, let's say, to the spirituality of things, we'll say, as are my parents. And, so I'm sitting there going, well, I was raised in the same family, in the same house with the same people. How did I end up going this way when it seems to me they're going that way, for lack of a better way to put it? And, what I felt is useful for other people to see is that it really didn't matter, or doesn't matter, their circumstances, how much abuse they had, whether it was physical or mental or energetic growing up, or where they were born, whether they were born native, so to speak, or whatever. And perhaps, what I have noticed is it just seems to be more regular people in this time that are getting the opportunity to share from a perspective of integrity, like you have in this chat, in this conversation. And perhaps that will give people, I just want to say to our viewers here, an opportunity to find for themselves, the grounding they need. I mean, anybody can stop and breathe. As you say, anybody could go out and sit under a tree for a half an hour, perhaps, and see what their heart is trying to tell them. Maybe, anybody can take, a walk away from even society. If they're afraid of the mask rules or the mask laws, go into nature somewhere and, strip down as much as they dare and, run around until their breath is, finally fulfilling, what's required. Oxygen cleanses, as you know, right? Deep breaths take the poisons out of your body. They regenerate your cells. They rejuvenate your brain, even when it's fogged up. What do you feel, perhaps, and I'll take it back to what's going on and why and where people can go in relation, like a lot of people want to make a community, right? I know a lot of people that are trying to move away to different parts of the world, let's say, South America or small farms in the middle of nowhere. It seems to me, from what I know about your circumstances, you're directly in the middle of a large population. Am I right with that?
Yeah, I'm just outside of the Metro Detroit area. Brighton is, let's see, probably about 30 miles, 35 miles northwest of downtown Detroit, I believe. So, I mean, for me, it's a little easier because I'm very close. I'm 5-minute drive to the woods, if that. But the other thing too that I've noticed as well, and I don't know if you've noticed this too, Lorenzo, but the air is different. I don't know if you've experienced that, but there's a lot of differences going on in the world that I don't know if people are aware of, as much as perhaps we all need to be. And one of that is the air. The air quality is different. No matter what they broadcast as the air quality on Weather Channel or whatever you're watching, the air feels different when you breathe. It's almost like there's a little less oxygen in there. And maybe it's what you were talking about before with the chemtrails, or maybe it's that the more population in the world, or maybe it's the rate of obsolescence, and maybe it is the acceleration of social reality as it has been for the last few years. Or maybe it's us. Maybe we're changing in a certain way, or we're evolving in a certain way where the air is different to us as well. I'm not sure, but definitely there's something different in the air, or there's something different about the air, and there's something also different about the axis of the earth. And I don't mean to go off on tangents or whatever, but I don't know if you've noticed this, but over the last couple of years, I've noticed that where the sun is supposed to be setting in the sky on the horizon at certain times of the year is not where it is. And I just recently saw an article on the weather.com channel, which is interesting. I don't know why I had seen it. It must have been on a like a news feed or something on my page or whatever, where the Weather Channel is acknowledging that the axis of the earth has shifted, which is interesting. But maybe that has something to do with the air being different. Maybe that has something to do with how things are accelerating, how time is even different now. It doesn't pass the same way it used to, in a linear form or a structured format, And so a lot of things are changing, the nuances of life that most of us are not aware of, so to speak, to a certain degree, that we notice these differences and changes. And so I wonder, if there are other people that may have experienced similar insights about the world and how it's progressing or regressing, depending on how you look at it. I wonder if people are seeing that, beyond the overwhelming news broadcasts of the pandemic, or what used to be the U.S. election when that was dominating the news cycle, and so on and so forth. there's always, I always find it interesting when I started talking with Alva about it, and when I started doing my own research about what's really going on beyond, what we're being told is going on. I started to realize that there were a lot of other things going on underneath the surface of what's being presented as reality, or whatever we perceive as life, so to speak. So I'm just wondering, like, in comparison to how the air is nowadays, or the axis of the earth shifting, or many, many other things that we're not aware of that are occurring, that, if you share with somebody that's not aware of those things, they think you're crazy or a conspiracy theorist or whatever. But it's sad to me, Lorenzo. I think the one thing, going back to one of the things that you said earlier, I think the people that are propagating profit or propagating war or politics, like you had mentioned, they're all just really terrified people. They're terrified of losing control. They're terrified of losing, whatever power or influence they have in the world. And so all these people that are doing the worst things in the world to people, or, to the land or the earth or whatever, they're just all terrified people that are terrified of losing what they have, or what they think they have. So that helped, going back to what you had asked me before about how am I able to get myself into a space of being grounded and centered and focused, and find my breath and reclaim my power in any situation in my life, is understanding that these people that are the powerful people, whether they're royal people or politicians or corporations or centralized bankers or whatever you want to throw out there, they're all just like scared kids on a playground, terrified of getting their lunch money stolen from them, because they're different. So I look at it that way, and it kind of, in some ways it's sad that people choose to live in a certain way where they try and dominate others or control others for the sake of their own insecurities. Because deep down inside, I think it has more to do with coveting or covering their fear, insecurity, and their unwillingness to transform to become who they were meant to be or destined to be, in relation to the universe. Most people I've seen are more focused on covering up their fear and insecurity than actually looking at themselves on a deep level and realizing, like you said earlier, the importance of transformation, and that it all comes down to us being able to understand the opportunity, claim the power on a personal level of choosing to transform ourselves. And in doing so, when we're focused on that, it ultimately transforms our environment anyway. And so if you have more and more people doing that, then you have more and more of a transformed environment or a transformed world. So I tend to find myself praying for people that are stuck in the psychosis of fear and insecurity and power and control and greed, because I do believe that, for whether it's bankers or politicians or, corporations, CEOs, whatever, they all are suffering a psychosis. And I think that it would be a very good service for the psychological community or the psychiatrist community to come out and acknowledge that these are social psychoses that are leading to the degeneration of the earth and to the degeneration of society. And if we scientific, because everybody's all about science now, right? So if a psychologist came out and said, somebody that is so greedy that they are addicted to greed, that they're willing to do anything, even kill people for money, that's a social psychosis. You have a problem. You need to deal with that problem, and whether it's the CEO of a company or somebody that has addicted problems with alcohol or whatever, or they are incessantly watching television, or whether, those are all social psychoses that are ultimately weighing down the progression and the evolution of society as a whole. So I think that it starts, like you said earlier, it starts with each individual person being willing to transform and being willing to look deep into themselves, which I would have hoped people would have been doing for the last 14 months since this whole pandemic started and everybody was locked down. Well, that's a great opportunity to get present to yourself, get present to the universe and get related on that level of, soul or whatever, and start to really unravel the intricate mess that all of us have to endure through with society and programming and conditioning.
I mean, I would agree. I don't know about yourself, but I found my biggest transformations have come when I've been by myself. Whether it's been a walk in the woods or a meditation in my room, or I take long walks by myself pretty much every day, several of them. It's when I do my meditations because you're forced to breathe when you take long walks, and you're forced to be quiet, and you don't think as much, and your heart starts pumping more, obviously, because you're exercising. And when that part of my body is moving on its own in a natural rhythm, it's when I start to meditate just in a calm, positive fashion. It just kind of happens, right? It's not a stress where you're trying to figure something out. It's just kind of, ideas are descending on you, and inspiration is happening as you're inspiring, taking deep breaths. And perhaps I feel we all ask for what's going on in our lives, good, bad, horrible, indifferent, or fantastic, in my opinion. And the fact that the world has asked to be locked away might be, as you said, an inspiration. Okay, let's put it that way, for people to spend more time by themselves, to understand themselves, to meditate with themselves, to figure out. I mean, what it comes down to, I think, is a lot of people are afraid of finding out the bad things about them, the horrible things inside them. I mean, I can go along with all of the distractive ideas that you had mentioned. I watched too much TV, I drank too much at one point, whatever. I worked incessantly, I chased money, or I chased ladies, or I chased things, however you want to put it, and all to hide the fact that I was hiding from my own horribleness, okay, or my own fears, or my own dark side. And I've seen for myself, every time I face them, it's been fantastic, right? You're laughing 5 minutes later, or you feel lighter, right? It's like, obviously, you get rocks out of your pocket, or, if you'll pardon me being rude, you go to the washroom after holding things in for too long. You're going, oh my goodness, that was great. Or, oh my goodness, I put down the heavy bag, or, oh my goodness, I finally realized how I've been unloving to this person. And so then, right away, the other path opens up. Right in front of you. It's like you say, if you say, oh no, I haven't been unloving, I haven't been unloving, then like you said, you start drinking, or you start distracting, or you start watching TV to sit with that lie, and in relation to what you think is a lie for yourself. I'll put it, not that anyone else can tell you. And as soon as you go, oh my goodness, maybe I've been horrible to this person or myself, or I haven't been kind, fill in your own blanks. And then suddenly other options seem to be sitting there that were literally in your lap, but you didn't notice before. Just by, I think if there's one thing we can share with our viewers in this conversation, it's that it's great to find out how you've been bad in relation to what you feel is bad for yourself. I'm not saying to anyone else pointing a finger at you at all, because I don't believe in that at all. It's great to find out why your life hasn't been working the way you would like it to work. It's great to find out why you're not healthy. It's great to find out why you're not happy. It's great, it's great to find out your own psychosis, as you say, because once you figure out, I was a secondary psychopath for a long time, only thinking of myself. There's no doubt I was learned that way growing up. I'm also from the East Coast. I've driven by your neck of the woods many times. I'm from Toronto, and when we used to drive on our family vacations to Florida, I can still remember the grand differences, let's say, of going from Windsor, which is in Canada, south, into going right over the border into Detroit. And as you mentioned, the difference in the air quality, you could feel a difference in the conscious dream quality at that point, because I was from Toronto, and I never really experienced, I don't want to call it a ghetto, but let's say the intense living conditions of certain parts of Detroit, or how they used to be. There, there's no doubt about it. As a young man when I was 14, and then you'd go from the woodsy area of Canada, and then you're in downtown Detroit, and then you go, oh my goodness, what's going on? You could just feel a different sort of heaviness in the dream quality, let's say, of what people believe, what they see as possible, and what they're living for themselves, and how their lives are. And even if you just look at that border, maybe that could be a good inspiration for people to see. You could be living here on one side of the border where it feels really heavy and impossible, and you just jump to the other side, and suddenly there's trees and nature. And I find that admitting what you don't like, whatever it is the first step in admitting or finding a solution to what maybe you would rather like or rather experience.
Sure. Yeah, I think going to what you were talking about in regards to people taking the opportunity over the last year or more to find out who they were, to become present to, maybe some of the darker things about themselves or the things that are unhealthy or whatever. Like, I think one of the most important things I've learned is that if you're running away from the darkness, you'll never understand the light. You just won't. You have to face the darkness. You have to, whether it's your darkness or the great mystery darkness or whatever it is that your belief system is, or your experiential system is a better word phrase for it. But you have to, I think, all of us have to understand that embracing the darkness of ourselves is as vital and as necessary and required to understand the light of ourselves. And I heard David Lynch, the filmmaker, talk about that recently in reference to Twin Peaks. I don't know if you ever watched Twin Peaks before, but I'm a pretty big fan of Twin Peaks. But he was talking about how you have to walk through the darkness of yourself. And I think he was heavily influenced by TM meditation, because he does a lot of work with transcendental meditation. But anyway, so he was talking about the importance of being able to walk through our own darkness, or become intimated with our own darkness, to be able to understand the full potential of our light. And I think that's, if there's a reality to that for people, like you had mentioned earlier, you have to go through that darkness. You have to understand that darkness of yourself, and it may not be. It's most likely not as bad as you think it is, and that goes back to the whole perceptual thing, where people look at, like that whole adage of, they see a shadow of a monster cast against a wall in an alley, and it turns out to be a little cat. But their perception of it was that it was this big monster, and so they ran away from it. And later on, they found out that it was a cat, and that ultimately it was an opportunity to be able to shift the perception if they were able to face the darkness. And maybe the biggest darkness that people are facing right now is their very perception. Maybe the darkness that all of us have to face is our individual perception, or the perception that we have created, or invented is a better word, based on our experience in social reality and life in general.
And I feel if people realize the power they have, the power, if you take the responsibility for having created a bad life, whatever it is, then you automatically pick up the responsibility for transforming that.
Oh, yeah.
As soon as you stop blaming or shaming, or whatever you want to call it, or feeling guilty, you immediately, bring the energy, I would say, back to your own two hands, for lack of a better way to put it, to use that power to, as soon as you're blaming someone, you're still waiting for something to change, right? Or you're, like you said, afraid of the cat. As soon as you face the cat, you go, right. I can only say that from my experience. Every time I've run, your fears never go away. Like you said, they follow you your whole life if you don't face them. And as soon as you face them, well, then maybe you can figure out, why you put them there in the first place. Why.
Oh, sure.
And then,
but I think it's one of those, fear for people, right, especially now, it's one of those unconscious forms of existence, because people have conditioned themselves to separate themselves from their fear. And years ago, I was talking with my wife about fear, and what occurred to me years ago is that fear isn't what we think it is. People think that fear is this scary thing, or this terrifying thing, or that this impending doom, like all of us have been seemingly living in the social reality experience of the last 14 months or whatever it's been of the pandemic, of the impending cloud hanging over us, that it's coming, whatever. But I talked to her about it a long time ago, that in my opinion, if everything is energy, okay, if everything is energy, then what fear is our perception of raw energy that has not been processed or focused into something positive. So there's a reality that we can observe as human beings, understanding that fear is not what we have been led to believe it is on a personal level, and that fear is like the cat, the shadow of the cat in the alley. Fear is not what we make it. We tend to overemphasize the experience of fear or the energy of fear, but I truly believe that fear is a raw energy that we haven't been able to process, but our energetic signature is impacted in such a way that we believe in the illusion of fear, and then we process it in some way, mostly probably through the mind, which impacts our heart and our body and so on and so forth. But we process the raw energy that we may sometimes interpret as fear in such a way that is a disempowering experience. But if we're able to translate or transpose, another musical term, that raw energy into something that's refined, that actually can be allocated to creativity or imagination or personal evolution, transformation, or consciousness and awareness, then it's no longer fear, because we've been able to transpose it. And I guess the best analogy I can come up with is how the alchemists used to be able to transform metal into gold or something of that nature. Maybe that is our opportunity as human beings, to be able to take the initial reaction that we have to an energy that is different than what we're used to, which we ultimately interpret through our minds as fear, and then allow it to move through us in such a way that we're able to process it and transpose it into something that is beneficial and positive to not only us, but our environment, our communities, and the world.
You hit the nail on the head, in my opinion. From the question I asked even at the beginning, what would be a good motivation for people? How can they see what to do if they're afraid to face things? If they're lacking something in their current lifestyle or life, according to, again, their own perspective on what they may be lacking. It's positive to face your fears, right? It's positive to sit down and understand what's going on with yourself. It's like everyone wants a solution. Everyone wants to live in love, let's say. Everyone wants to have a good life. Everyone wants to be healthy. Pretty much everyone I've ever come across, anyways, unless they have a really deep psychosis, are after those sorts of outcomes for their day-to-day lives. And most people go, well, I don't know how to do it though, right? If you chase money, or you chase relationships, or you chase a bigger car, or you chase a political party, or a different place of the world to live in, I think you're missing the point, in my opinion. You're missing the point of what it is. And in some ways it seems very simple. And obviously Iam and I can go much deeper. I think we've only, scratched the surface of the metaphysical or physical or dream aspects of what we've been talking about. I've had to bite my tongue a few times because I didn't want us to go into a divergent area of conversation, which I'm hoping, we can get to in future conversations.
Oh, for sure.
But in a simple aspect of it, it's to your benefit to face your fears. You'll grow from it. You'll be loving from it. You'll feel fantastic from it. You will get everything you've ever wanted. It takes a lot of fertilizer to make roses, as they say. So, it's another beautiful way of looking at it is, if you face your fears, who knows what you'll fertilize in your life by facing the things that you find stinky about your current, you fill in the blank, our lovely viewers.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that too, because it is kind of like what we were talking about on the phone a week ago. There is, and there has been an extraordinary energetic shift in the universe that has been going on since before the winter solstice of 2020. And it's a time for all of us to be able to connect in ways that we never have, perhaps as a human race, to things like consciousness, creativity, imagination, transformation, evolution, being able to transcend above the duality of social reality and so on and so forth. And I think that part of what is going on in social reality right now with how things are playing out with all the distractions, like you mentioned before, politics and the pandemic and so on and so forth, is there's also the antithesis of the universal energetic shift that's going on that is happening in society. But that shift is going more towards the fear and the anger and the frustration and the partisanship and the insecurity and all of that. And so I think that, going back to what you mentioned in the beginning of the interview about the newest article that I wrote called An Essential Choice, is we have a choice to either align with the universe and the energetic shift that's going on right now, or we go along with the flow of the current of society, which is leading us down a very different path, more towards captivity, more towards fear, more towards oppression, more towards things that will continue to imprison us in a duality or dualistic system within social reality. And ultimately, I think that it comes down to, maybe people are choosing social reality or that social shift because that's what's familiar to them, even if there is fear or anxiety or illness or disease or even death. That's familiar to them, so they'll go down that path because they're aware of that, and maybe it'll turn out to be something different than what it might become. But for people that may not have made a commitment or a connection with the universe and the energetic shift that's going on in the universe, it's very foreign. It's almost like speaking a different language. They don't understand, people don't understand, they can't relate, they can't connect. So I can understand, now talking with you about it, Lorenzo, that I think a lot of people are going down the road of the social shift because that's what's always been familiar to them. But unfortunately, I think that that's been mostly supported by social conditioning and social engineering and how they're brought into social reality and how they're indoctrinated into social reality, to the extent where they go down that path because they think that's the only path to take.
I think humans are habitual, but in my opinion, but the good part about that is you can be habitually wonderful as well. You can be habitually spiritual. You can be, habitually heroic. You can be habitually abundant and successful. It's just a matter of what you choose to practice. You practice being in a social cage, that's where you'll end up. It is encouraged everywhere you look around, but you got to go, doesn't really matter, right? You got to make your own choices and be free for yourself. And I think I talk to a lot of people that don't see an alternative, and there's really some people you just can't talk to. There's no doubt about it. On the other hand, maybe for a whole bunch of our viewers that have been sitting on the fence and know that there's something out there and haven't been able to quite grasp it, I think perhaps we've given them a means to, if they haven't started yet, at least to begin, looking in a different direction, looking at a different way, looking at a different, even small actions like sitting under a tree and breathing for half an hour one day and seeing where that takes them. I think we're going to have to end it here pretty much. I know there's some construction going on, not that I want to, but they're building a house not so far from my office over here, and they've been jackhammering the ground, which has been annoying me for a few days. But then I've also, as we'll say, I can end it that way for myself, is that I see that as the world telling me maybe my foundations are being jackhammered, maybe my foundations are changing. Maybe what annoys me is actually something that's positive and beautiful, in that when the world is showing me that, you can destroy something even as solid as cement, might take
it's very symbolic.
Yeah, it might take you a while, but I'm going, because I know that's what I'm doing for my life. I'm happy to see that. And that's what I've meant by, look around your circumstances. The good can be bad, the bad can be good. It's all a matter of how you interpret things. We are creative beings, as you say. And, how you feel with what's going on in your life can definitely change the outcome. Is there any last bits of wisdom? I'm going to leave some links below. I'm going to leave a link for Iam's article that he just mentioned. Perhaps I'll ask him if he wants to share some music with you. I don't want to put him on the spot here, but if there's some other bits that he shared over the past many years, I'll let you, our viewers, know by sharing those links below this and how you can further follow along. And if anyone has any questions for myself or Iam or anything else you might want us to talk about down the road, you can send us a note and I'll pass it along. And yeah.
Yeah, I think the last thing, that kind of was inspired by this conversation that we've had, Lorenzo, is I think it's also important for all of us to realize that it's an individual personal choice to connect with, what's going on in the universe and so on and so forth, to transform ourselves, to find our creative voice, to express our imagination. We have to find it for ourselves, and it goes back to the breathing practice of reclaiming our power through our breath, that choosing to find our path distinct from social reality is our choice, and the power that comes from our choice will bring an experience of empowerment and fulfillment that I can't express accurately in words beyond the experience. But I mean, we all have to create our own experience. We all have to create our own perception, and we all have to connect to something greater than ourselves. And if we can do that, then this world would look a lot different than it does.
I mean, I fully agree. I mean, this is amazing. There's so many historical studies, alternative historical studies, alternative medical studies. You can go on forever, but if you figure out, make a choice for yourself, see what you need to do, empower your own path, see where you're not happy and take the responsibility for making those choices, even if it's hard, even if it's very hard, even if it looks impossible. And there are always people out there that are willing to help you. I mean, during this craziness of the last 14 months, I've had the opportunity on a personal level to meet with people like I am, to meet with other people around the world that I would never have contacted face to face, so to speak, before. I've been in contact with them, but now that it's being kind of forced more this way, we'll say on the internet, or we'll say less physical, it's kind of using the negative for the positive. And I'm getting an opportunity to meet and make this community that happens to be everywhere. Maybe there's a reason some are in Detroit and some are in Germany and some are in Japan and some are in Canada, some are in Australia, and some are in Hawaii. And, maybe we're intelligent nodes across this plane that will help this dream transform by, being the heroes everyone's always dreamed they could be.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it, Lorenzo.
I as well. Thank you so much. Please stay on the line. I wish to continue talking with you afterwards. Now, everyone, I will leave all that information below. Please like and subscribe if you haven't. Feel free to share. And I thank you all for joining us here again. And I hope to talk with Iam again very, very soon. And we are also going to be launching our new NOW Agora over the next little while, where you will get an opportunity, perhaps on a regular basis, to get a chance to meet face-to-face, as I've had the lovely pleasure of talking with Iam today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for doing what you do.
Can't make me lie to my heart. No one tells me where I should start. Freedom first is what I say.